According to a study released in May of 2012, America currently ranks 16th out of 26 developed nations in the number of 25 to 34-year-olds with university degrees. Enrollment in American universities dropped this year for the first time since its all-time high in the fall of 2009. And more than 40% of private colleges reported enrollment declines in the past academic year. Skyrocketing tuition costs and cuts in federal subsidies for higher education are being cited as the main causes of this drop in college enrollment. And President Obama has made lowering the cost of higher education and controlling student loan debt some of his top priorities of the campaign trail.
We've got to make college more affordable for more young people. We can't put the middle class at a disadvantage. We can't price out folks who are trying to make sure that they not only succeed for themselves, but help the country succeed. We can't price the middle class out of a college education. We can't do it.
So are soaring tuition and unmanageable student loan debt making higher education an unrealistic goal for America's young people? Joining me now to offer their takes on this issue are Richard Fowler. He's a political strategist and the National Policy and Advocacy Director for Young Democrats America, and Hadley Heath, a senior policy analyst at the Independent Women's Forum. I want to welcome both of you to the Heat. Let me ask you, are we pricing out the middle class? Let's start with you.
We definitely are pricing out the middle class when it comes to getting an affordable college education. And here's how we're doing it. College tuition continues to go higher and higher and higher. And at the same time, you know, people in the House of Representatives and in the United States Congress, they continue to find ways to either cut Pell Grants. They found ways. They had this big battle a couple of days ago of whether or not they were going to keep the Stafford rates at a lower percentage than it would have been originally. And all these things are sort of pricing out the middle class, and it's making people afraid to go to college because they're afraid of the debt that they will incur to do it.
Hadley, how do you feel?
I do feel that tuition rates obviously have been increasing, but President Obama's approach is to increase more subsidies on the demand side. And this to me is actually the wrong approach, because what that does is increases demand and allows colleges to get away with raising these tuition rates and sometimes excess waste.
What's the answer then?
Well, I think the answer is to make the relationship between the student and their college more direct with less government intervention. But taking subsidies out or giving people more responsibility, more accountability in their own education means they can therefore hold universities accountable not just for the price increases, but also for the value of the degree. We've got half of the recent graduates in this country without jobs, and if they can't get jobs, then there's no way they can pay back the loans, and it certainly calls into question how valuable that degree is.
Does that work for you?
Not at all. I mean, at the end of the day, it's pretty simple. I think what we've seen from President Obama and Democrats is a push to make college more affordable, and the way to do that is, helping, it's not necessarily giving handouts or providing subsidies. What it's doing is giving these individuals a chance at the American dream. It's giving them an option. I mean, a couple years ago, before Ronald Reagan, that was the norm in this country for people to get an option to go to college. In all the developed countries in the world, college is an affordable option. It's only in the United States where students have to take out mountains and mountains and mountains of debt to go to college. The rate right now is $1 trillion of debt in this country is student loan debt. And it's going to be the next economic crisis if we don't act now.
Let me ask you this, though, to kind of piggyback off what Hadley said. Even when they're talking about the interest rates going up, and there was a big argument about that, at some point, doesn't Congress have to stop kicking the can down the road? I mean, what she's getting at with the subsidies, sooner or later, the two of you are going to end up paying for it, either early or later in life. I mean, isn't that the real issue, though?
Well, yeah, there's no question that, college tuition has gone sky high, and some universities are taking advantage of that. And so I think, there has to be a bipartisan balanced approach. We need to tell universities to keep their rates low so that students can afford to go to university. We also need to provide other options, like we've seen the president invest millions and millions and almost billions of dollars in community college programs, which are more affordable for students that are trying to achieve the American dream. But at the same time, the American government has to invest in the future of this country, and the best way to do that is through education.
Is education, though, becoming more of a business and not a civic responsibility, as he's talking about?
Higher education's always been a business. We've had private universities and public universities. As Richard said, yes, it's very expensive in the United States to go to college. And previously that was because the value of a college degree was so dependable, and so that's what I'm calling into question. But just to put the rates into context, Richard mentioned a few years ago with Ronald Reagan, but actually a couple of years ago, our college interest rates on student loans were 6.8, and they've been declining since 2007 to today's rate, which is 3.4%. That's an incredibly low rate. That's very subsidized, and to go back to 6.8, While yes, it is technically doubling the rate, it's only about $1,000 more interest per student loan. That takes about $8 more interest per month for these students who pay it off over 10 years. So it sounds like a huge increase in interest, but 1 year from now when we come back to this debate again, we should be considering it in the context of, oh, doubling a rate is actually going from an extremely low, way below market rate to something that is 6.8.
I don't know how I feel about that. I mean, the situation that we're being set up by the Republicans and members of the House of Representatives is, you pay to learn, then you work to pay at this rate, and that's basically what it's boiled down to. I don't understand why we would raise the rates. Everybody, and this it boggles the mind for me personally that the banks got a big bailout. All these big Fortune 500 companies have been bailed out by Washington. But when it comes to bailing out America's future, Washington has gone asleep. They're sleeping at the switch as students try to yearn for the American dream. The only way we're going to grow this economy is by investing in our future. Every other country, including China, is investing billions and billions of dollars into their students. And here in the United States, we want to make cuts, and all the cuts we want to make are going to be on the backs of the students instead of on the backs of the rich and the wealthy.
But you're both young, and if you look at the landscape out there, I mean, I can't begin to tell you people my age who have their kids moving back into their house, in their basement, because they can't find jobs, and they've got college education. So what his point is, they're up against it. If you don't even have the college degree, how far down the rung are you on the ladder?
And that's exactly it. And I think and that statistic is completely right. 1 in 4 young people are deciding to move back home with their parents because they not only can they not afford, they can't find a job, but they also can't afford the student loan debt that they've taken on to go to university. And in a country with so much wealth, that we would make the contrast and we would be willing to give tax cuts and give big corporate tax cuts away and not help our students achieve their dream. It just really boggles the mind.
I have to say I agree with you about the bailouts. I don't think we should be bailing out big banks, but I don't think taking more money out of the private sector in the form of increased taxation
is it's not really taking it out of the private sector. It's just having everybody pay their fair share.
Well, it is taking it out of the private sector, right? The only place that it can come from, because that's the only place that wealth is created.
It's the people coming from people. I mean, this is off the topic, but it's coming from people who are getting capital gains. They're not paying any money on their capital gains. They have offshore accounts similar to Mitt Romney, and they only pay 10% in taxes, whereas then there's people who are in the middle class, like everybody sitting around this table, we pay 35% in our taxes to the government.
Is there a war on youth out there? I know you have a feeling on this.
Of course, there definitely is a war on youth, and I think the culprits of this war, they've made themselves very clear, and they've identified who they are. And I think it's going to be very important going into November that young people understand who they are, and they understand the consequences of what this election means to them.
Hadley, I see you smiling. You don't agree, do you?
No, absolutely not. I think young people, more than maybe any other segment of the population, they value their independence, and that's what they want. They want to be independent. They want to be in a position in life where they can make their own earnings, they can buy their own health insurance, they can be independent, not just of the government, but of mom and dad's basement. And so I will pursue a policy that's different from the one the president is pushing, different from one that says, whenever you need, the government can supply it out of the government's hand. This is a situation, America is a country where we were never promised the right to happiness, but we were promised the right to pursue happiness. And so maybe education is part of that for some people. A higher education degree is. Maybe for some people it's not.
Well, Hadley, I know you were in college when Barack Obama ran the first time, and you talked about the enthusiasm, before we went on the air, the enthusiasm on the college campuses. Do you think it's still there this time around?
Absolutely not. I think there's, obviously some young people are just really stuck on the president's likability. They think he's a much more likable, more human candidate than Mitt Romney. And that may be true, but the fact of the matter is, those students are awake now to the public policies that he's pushing that are going to affect their lives, not just today, but kicking the can further down the road, especially when it comes to the national debt. Our generation is going to be stuck on a treadmill paying this off for decades to come.
Richard, 4 years ago, hope and change, and I know a lot of young people really are kind of disappointed in the president. There hasn't been more advances.
I think the president's done everything in his power, and like she said, young people do like independence, but unfortunately for young people, with the $1 trillion price tag of student debt that's hanging over their head, they're missing out on that independence. They're missing out on the chance to create a family. They're missing out on a chance to live the American dream. And one thing that the president gets is why young people are so attracted to him is that he gets what it is to have student loans. Both him and Michelle had student loans, unlike Mitt Romney, who his loans were, he was more of the silver spoon in his mouth. President Obama paid off his student loans. He understands the struggles that young people go through, and he's done everything in his power with the Congress that he's been given to try everything possible to keep student debt low and also to make college more affordable. And I think young people understand that, and that's what's going to cause them to go out to the polls and vote for him.
Are the young people going to be a factor in this election? And I'll start with you.
I think they may be a factor. Disappointingly, I think a lot of young people will stay at home on Election Day because they're so disappointed with President Obama, and they're not rushing to support Mitt Romney either. I think they're just disillusioned a lot about the future, their personal prospects, and also the direction of the country.
Richard, you get the final word.
You know, I think young people, they know there's challenges. I think they'll come out in droves to support the president because they understand what's at stake in this election.
Hadley, Richard, thanks so much for coming on the Heath.
Sure,
Appreciate it.